mic test is working. Okay.
I like the ruler. And DJI, it's good.
I need two mics. That's why. Okay, I'm here with Andrew Lim. He is the Research and Innovation Attaché at the Quebec government in Seoul. Thank you so much for taking the time to be here today and answering my question. I'm so happy to have you. So my first question is regarding your work you're doing, your role. Could you introduce us about how long you've been doing that and what's the whole purpose of the work you're doing?
So as she mentioned, I am a research innovation attaché. So as the title suggests, I do science tech innovation collaboration between Quebec and to a larger extent Canada and of course Korea. And science tech innovation means everything from aerospace to quantum, AI, advanced materials. So the people I usually work with are people who do that, like startups or institutions, universities, government entities, etc. So my work is to put them together so that they build the relations, they get the ideas together and do some sort of innovation. Maybe they could put a product in another product to make it better, etc. So that's the job I do here. And the reason this job exists, one of the political reason is because back a few years back, there was a science tech innovation agreement between Canada and Korea. And of course, Quebec is still part of Canada. So they created they saw the opportunity, so they've created this job. So just to give you a background, there are other provincial representations in Korea, like BC, Alberta, Ontario, but they mostly have just trade and FDI focused people, although they do some research innovation on the side. But Quebec government, they understand this is their bread and butter. Like innovation is extremely important. So they understood that we need a person like on the site, like all the time doing this for the collaboration to happen. Hence, science tech innovation collaboration happens most with Quebec and Korea for obvious reasons. But just to expand, in the Canadian Embassy, there's also two people who do science tech innovation like myself. But of course, they cover all of Canada, so it's not as precise. So they can't just help everybody because there's too many people. But because I'm able to just help Quebec, we could get more precise, more hands-on work done. So I think that's the value that having someone like me actually here, that's the value that we bring.
Wow. My next question is about, because right now we are at NEXTRISE here in COEX. It's a huge startup event. So I just wonder, could you briefly explain what is the meaning of this big event and how is it meaningful to have the Quebec government here representing?
Thank you. So NEXTRISE, as the title suggests, it's a startup conference, which will be the next one to rise and become a unicorn like this. And this year they have the theme Shape the Next. So yes, there's so much innovation these days. AI, robotics, it's so fast. So what's the next? So through this conference, they want to shape the next. So that's the term. And in Korea, there are three major startup conferences. NEXTRISE, Try Everything and Come Up. And NEXTRISE, from what I know, is probably the biggest. It's organized by KITA, the Korea International Trade Association, with Korea Development Bank and other partners. And KITA is very important because they actually run COEX, conference exhibition. They also have a startup center, whatnot. And actually, we have an MOU with KITA, or Investment Quebec International. When we had a big innovation delegation this February, KITA was our official partner. So up there, I think you were there. Yes, exactly.
Okay,
So
I
during
didn't
that
know.
startup branch,
Wow.
that's also owned by KITA. So
Okay.
they do trade in everything. But of course,
Wow.
startup is one sector that they do. So I work with that team closely. Hence, we had that event, we had the MOU, and they're the organizers. And because we're so close, of course, they invited me as a speaker. But also last year, we had our former Amériac minister, Martin
Yes.
Biron, she came.
Yes.
We also
Yes.
had a panel, I
Yes.
spoke there, and we had two Quebec startups exhibit last year, Vero AI and Cubic Space. Unfortunately, this year, because of another event we had last year, we were too busy. So I'm still collaborating with NEXTRISE, but it's just me speaking, and I'll do like networking and whatnot. But like I said, NEXTRISE is the, I think, biggest startup conference in Korea.
Oh,
So that's very
okay. It's the
important.
big. Oh.
Yes. So hence, because innovation, yes, there are universities, government too, but startup plays a big role in that. So that's
Wow.
very important to make sure I'm within the ecosystem.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. Thank you so much. So my third question is regarding the presentation you just did. So you presented about the Canadian, but regarding Quebec ecosystem and the opportunities within Korea. So could you explain briefly more about the presentation you just introduced here at NEXTRISE?
Thank you so much. So my presentation title was Quebec, Korea, Cases and Opportunities. So I presented about, of course, general information on Canada and Quebec, but also some of the successful cases, especially many other joint research program I established, or startup programs where we send, like, for example, Seoul startups to Montreal or Gyeonggi startups to Sontag, or we also bring missions, etc. So I talked about, yes, information in general, but of course, especially programs that startups or VCs or practitioners in NEXTRISE, what they would like to hear, what they could do with us, especially, for example, their startups. Maybe if they listen to the presentation, they always wanted to maybe go abroad. But quite often people would think, oh, Silicon Valley, which is fine. Of course, that's
Silicon
America.
Valley. Yeah.
That's of course, it is the top ecosystem. But as I could imagine, if you just go there, like, no offense, like, who are you? So I would say, hey, there's people like me in the Quebec government office here. Why don't you work with me? Create a good portfolio case in Quebec and maybe all of Canada, doing POCs, doing research, all that. And then with that portfolio, then you go to America. And then they're like, Gloria, oh, look, I already worked with Quebec here, Canada, this and that. I already know the ecosystem. And Canada, America is kind of one business-ish ecosystem as well.
Yeah.
So if you have a good case in Canada and Quebec, you could use that, and people will recognize that in Silicon Valley or in America as well. Just Korea's fine too, but Korea's a bit, it's a different ecosystem. But when Americans see, oh, you already work with Canada and Quebec, hey, we're kind of like one business area. Oh, let's do it together. So we often promote ourselves as a gateway to other areas such as North America. So that also works very well. And I also mentioned about some of the upcoming conferences and places that I'll be or Quebec will be, because the main thing about collaboration, you have to meet.
Yeah.
Yes, email and Zoom's okay, but I mean, that could only go so far. You have to meet, like, have a meal, maybe grab beer and actually like really develop the relation. Yes, tech in itself is important too, but I think relationship probably is even more important. So always my job and the presentation is telling about all the success, all the things we could do together, conferences in Quebec and Canada and in Korea and elsewhere, like CES, so that people could contact me and I could put them in touch. Either I go or not. But the key is they have to meet their counterpart, Quebec people, Canadians, so they can collaborate.
Thank you so much. So I have one last question for you. So last week we were here at the Smart Tech Korea, and the Quebec received the Nation of Honor. So I wonder how much work, like what does it mean to receive this kind of like title, the Quebec as a Nation of Honor in Korea? So could you briefly explain more about the background of the work you've been doing to reach this title, and also what does it mean for Quebec in Korea in this context?
Thank you for highlighting that. Yes, as I mentioned previously, relations are very important. Connections, like, it's important everywhere, but I feel especially in Korea. So as she mentioned, during Smart Tech Korea, I would argue probably the biggest tech conference in Korea, because they use Quebec's called ABCD. So it's very big. And how I got Quebec to be the Nation of Honor is we developed the relations. I worked with the organized X Forum for many years, probably a bit also during my previous capacity at my previous job as well. So they knew me for many, many years. So before, yes, I collaborated with them on a kind of a more minor scale. For example, I spoke there. We had some speakers from Quebec actually come speak there. We had a few companies come. So it was a bit more minor, a few companies, few speakers. I speak there, but that was over many years. So they realized, hey, Quebec's really good. He's trustworthy, but also like they saw that Quebec has value. Like, they do good in AI, there's Mila, all that, because they also learned from our collaboration. They're like, oh, like AI is big and tech, it's good. So they offered us this Nation of Honor for a very good deal, let's say. Yes, there was lots of coverage, so many news articles, so many B2Bs. And I think from what I know, I think this is the first time Quebec has ever gotten this kind of honor in such a big scale event. So I think it was a very big success, because I think Koreans need to know, yes, Quebec, Canada, we have maple syrup, snow, and that's all Cirque du Soleil, that's very good. But we also have AI and tech.
Exactly.
McGill University de Montréal, we have Concordia, we have very good ecosystem. And I think people start to realize this. And I actually feel that. That's why a lot of people come, many good collaborations working. So I think promoting ourselves, getting out there, speaking, but also, Carol, your work with your channel now, that is very valuable, because people, they don't know what's going on. How can you even collaborate? So that's very important. So thank you for this opportunity.
I am the one to thank you. Thank you so much for your question, for your answer to my question and the time for today.
honor.
Thank you so much.